Welcome into the second episode of Dipo's Den. I am Evan DiPasquale, and this is my first guest on the show, and I am super excited. I never met her in college when I was there, but I do know that when I first saw the name, I was like, is this real? And it is Sage Running Rabbit of Buffalo State. Thanks for coming on the show.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me here.
All right, we're going to get this out of the way. How often do you get asked, is Sage Running Rabbit your real name?
I get asked quite often about it. Like I get like a lot of people are telling me like, "Oh my gosh, is Running Rabbit really your last name?" Or like people are just always in shock about it and I get so many questions about it. Like almost every single place I go to, like coming into Buffalo State, like when I first met everyone in person, everyone's like, "Is like Sage Running Rabbit your real name?" Like, yes, it is my real name. I have it on my birth certificate if you want to see. Like, I have everything. It's definitely a question I get asked quite often.
I mean, obviously my last name is not like crazy. I don't want to call yours crazy, but it's like different. You
Yeah.
don't see it very often. But in my ways, I always get asked, are you related to such and such DiPasquale? And usually it's a no. So that's how I was. I mean, I had a teacher in high school whose last name was DiPasquale, and I got asked like every year, is Mrs. DiPasquale your mom? And I would say no. Looking back at it now, I should have been like, yeah, she is my mom, and just had
You're
pulled
right.
off the greatest like prank. All right. So my next question is uh oh, where does your I don't want to botch it, but where does your Blackfoot tribe name come from? What does that mean? I did a little research on you. Yay me. So what is can you give the meaning behind it? I know that you're of Native American in Canada.
Yeah. So my first, like the one that you sent me, Apoyaki, was my first Blackfoot name, and it meant fair skinned woman because like my dad is native, my mom is white, and like I have fairly light skin compared to rest of people like on my reservation. So when I was like first born, I had like really, really fair skin compared to everyone else. So my one of my great grandparents like looked at me and was like, "Oh, Apoyaki, fair skinned woman." And then now my Blackfoot name is actually Apoyistanaki, which is fair Cree woman. So I got that from my great grandmother because she was a part of the Cree tribe and she passed away like a couple years ago, and then like as a gift to me and like going into like womanhood and growing up, my grandfather decided like it was fitting that like I get a new Blackfoot name. So then last summer I actually got the name Abuistanaki.
And see, I didn't even know that. It's crazy just the stuff that you learn. What has been the difference? Because you're from Alberta, and I don't know. You said you were a couple, like an hour away
I'm
from
an hour
Calgary.
from Calgary, yeah.
So an hour away from Calgary, and what has been the when you first came here? What was the adjustment period like? And also, why did you choose Buffalo State? What attracted you to coming here?
The adjustment period was definitely like something in like not challenging, but like was different for me because I've never moved so far away from home before. I've always only ever lived in my mom and dad's house, so it was definitely something different. And like meeting people who were kind of going through the same thing was kind of nice, being able to like adjust to finally living on my own. And then the reason that I chose Buff State was my brother used to go to Tompkins Cortland Community College, which is just like 10 minutes outside of Cortland, I think. So it was either I chose a school back home in Canada or I chose a school in New York State and played both hockey and lacrosse. So like I reached out to a couple different schools, and then Buff State was one of the first to get back to me, and then I started in the recruitment process and I started meeting the players on the team at the time, and it was, well, both teams were such a welcoming environment to me and were so accepting right away and were like, this is like what to expect, and it was like very straightforward. So I knew coming into Buff State, like I knew what was I was getting into, and then it was just like such a warm and welcome community for me, and that's definitely the reason I chose Buffalo State.
Yeah, that's awesome. I want to know, since you mentioned that you do play lacrosse
Mhm.
and hockey, and you told me that hockey is your first love. What kind of attracted you to lacrosse? Is it because it's kind of lacrosse kind of comes from I don't know if it was invented by the natives, but
Yes, yes.
it is very like when I'm gonna be a nerd. I took a Boy Scout merit badge called I think oh geez, this is not good. But it was about the Native Americans, and I remember we were playing lacrosse because that's what we had to do. Um, but what made you get into lacrosse?
So I actually started lacrosse quite late into my career, and it was because my mom and dad were looking for like another sport for my brother to play like after he's done hockey, so he's not just sort of lounging around and being lazy. So they were like, "Well, we're between like football." They tried baseball, wasn't really working out, and then they're like, "Well, football or lacrosse?" Football was a no because we don't really do like the heavy physical contact, and then so he did lacrosse for a season, and then everyone else in my family was like, "Well, like that's kind of interesting." And then our dad was like, "Well, it's like the medicine game as well. Like our culture created it." So I was like, "Okay." So then I started lacrosse at the age of 10 maybe, and then I've been playing box lacrosse in Canada ever since. And then I started field lacrosse just last year for the first time.
How different is field lacrosse compared to box? Because
They
you're like,
are, they are so different from one another. Like back home in box lacrosse, it's like a hybrid between hockey and lacrosse and field
mhm.
lacrosse, I'd say, because like box lacrosse, you have the 5-on-5. It's more physical, like especially in the girls' sport, like bodies are being dropped left and right, and it is just such a physical sport back home in Canada for box lacrosse. And then field lacrosse, it's more leaned back, and like you have like things like shoot in space, 8-meter shots, cards, and 11 people in the field. So they're so different from one another. And it was definitely very difficult trying to figure out like the rules, how to play, switch in hands, stuff like that.
Now, I'm sure that what was your first reaction when you were told you're not allowed to hit in field lacrosse?
It was I was in shock because I literally spent like my whole entire lacrosse career was, oh, I gotta hit people, I gotta run people into the boards, I gotta open floor hit them, and then it's like, well, in field lacrosse, it's like a little place, and then you direct them into the
Hmm.
direction you want them to go. So it was like, no, I have to be more laid back, and it's like it gets difficult times because I'm a very physical person because of hockey and box lacrosse. So it was definitely a big shock to me knowing that I can't just hit people whenever I wanted to.
Now, have you gone to a couple Bandits games? Like, I mean, I know that the Bandits are very, very good. They were just in the
Mhm.
NLL championship this past summer. Have you gone to any games this year?
I haven't been to any Bandits games, but when I was home, we used to have season tickets for the Roughnecks.
Oh, okay.
We had them for like 3 or 4 seasons, so I was almost at every single Roughnecks game back home.
Yeah, that I went to my first Bandits game back in like April, and I was like, what is this? I'm not used to this because normally, like the loudest, like it felt like a basketball atmosphere with a little bit extra.
Yeah.
That's what it really felt like. Was they're playing music, the PA guys like trying to hype up the crowd, like, oh my god, like when Matt Vince, I think his name is, the goalie for the Bandits, where like every time he made a save, he would always shout, "What's he got?" And then the whole crowd would shout, "Nothing." I was like, "What is? I am not used to this." It was entertaining, and they eventually lost to the Toronto Rock, which kind of sucked, but what are you gonna do? But um, I will say I want to ask about, now. Let's get into some Buffalo State stuff.
Mhm.
What has do you have a nickname for Coach Ramp? I think that's how you pronounce her last name, because I got flagged when I was doing a interview. I called Coach MB, the basketball coach, Coach Nugent, and they were like, nobody calls her that. So, well, I just want to ask. Well, first off, is there a nickname for her? And secondly, what has she meant for your young hockey career, and especially being a woman coaching in women's sports? Because there aren't that many female coaches as much as there should be.
Yeah. So she doesn't have like a formal nickname, I would say, that like everyone on the team calls her, but I like to call her Gramster just because it kind of rolls off the tongue. So it's whenever she gets on the ice, it's like, oh, it's Gramster. But I don't call her face to face sometimes just because I don't know how she'll react to it. But
I apologize. I said ramp and meant gramp. So
and then
she ever listens to this, apologize in advance.
and then having her as like a coach has been definitely an amazing thing because she's fresh out of college as well. I think she graduated a couple years ago because she was at Canton after she graduated and then she came to us. So it's knowing that she's so young and like was just through the same process that I'm going through right now as well has been amazing because it's something happens and I'm like, okay, like what did you do? And then she's like, well, here's what I did. Like she went through similar things that I'm going through, so it's definitely been helpful having her and like very inspirational knowing like she came from Elmira and Elmira has like an amazing hockey program. So like whenever she says something to me, like I'm like, okay, like I'm listening to her right away because she's definitely like helped me grow as a player and has been like someone I've been able to look up to as well throughout my college career because of like she's not just like, pushing things to the side. It's like if I have a question like, oh, like how do I fix my shot? Like am I making this right pass? She's like, okay, yes, like here's what you need to work on. Like or if it did work, like you can do this even better, stuff like that. Like she's just been very helpful and has been such a great role model I think for like me and other girls on the team as well.
All right, now little bit hockey and lacrosse. Well, first off, I want to ask, I've seen your Instagram posts on when you're playing box lacrosse back home. Sometimes it looks like you're playing on a carpet, and sometimes it looks like you're playing on like cement.
Oh
What
yeah.
is it that you're playing on?
It depends where like we are back home because like there are like the nicer, newer fields or boxes or not boxes, rinks that have like the turf, or like there is the ones that have just straight concrete with like the lines painted on. So it's definitely hard hitting when you're on the concrete.
Must be very. I don't know. Is it more painful to get hit on the concrete, or is it more painful to get hit on the ice?
I would definitely say the concrete because like in hockey you have all that equipment on, so it's not, it's being more absorbed. Whereas in the concrete, like I just have shoulder pads and then elbow pads, and then I hit the
Your
concrete
gloves.
and my gloves. I hit the concrete and it's automatic bruises everywhere.
How many bruises would you say you have at like the end of the season if you could count? It's
Oh
like
my,
your whole body purple, like at the end of a season.
I would say, yeah, especially the legs, so bad.
All right. So this is one thing. This is a tough question, but I feel like it's a fun question for at least for me.
Hmm.
If you had a goal song, what would it be and why?
um,
Because I remember I asked your captain Angelina Cruzal when I was with Buff State and we did 10 questions. I asked her that question and she had no idea. So it can be a stumper.
yeah, because it's like you can have a song just for you or like one for the whole entire team. But for me, I think I would be between two. I would think Let's Get It Started by the Black Eyed Peas or Pump It.
Okay, okay. Yeah, I don't well, I never played hockey before, obviously. But when if I ever played, I mean I played little league baseball, but if I've ever played like in if I ever played where I had the opportunity to have walk up music, I probably would have chosen. Have you ever heard the song "Bulls on Parade" by Rage Against the Machine?
I think I've heard of it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like there's a lot better walk up, easier walk up songs that you could find in like baseball rather than hockey, because you're not playing it like at the start of your it, how should I put it? You're not playing like the start of the song. You can pick out a specific portion of the song, but that's always I always feel like is a challenge, because I don't know how, because every Sabres player has one. I mean, Jeff Skinner has been the best with just his songs, but that's neither here nor there. I see you have an Austin Matthews jersey behind you.
Yes.
I obviously, the only thing I can appreciate about Austin Matthews is he's a great American player. And so when it comes to like Olympics or world championships, he's obviously going to be one of the best players. But I want to ask, what made you get interested in the Leafs or Austin Matthews?
So it was actually a really funny story behind why I sort of fell in love with Austin Matthews. So I actually had an ex who had like not the same name but the same first name as Austin. And everyone was like, "Oh my gosh, like your ex looks like Austin Matthews." And I'm like, "Who is Austin Matthews?" And then I looked him up and I was like, "Oh my gosh, he was like just drafted in 2016, so like he was brand new in the NHL." And I was like looking him up, searching stats, and I'm like, "Wow, he's really good." And then I started, watching the Maple Leafs game, and I was like, "Well, the Leafs are kind of good too." And then I was just always appalled by like the way Austin Matthews plays and like his shot, and then left the X and fell in love with Austin Matthews.
uh See here, the one thing I will always remember about Austin Matthews is you mentioned he was drafted in 2016. I graduated high school in 2016. Do you know where the 2016 NHL draft was?
It's in Buffalo.
It was in Buffalo, the exact same day as my graduation. And a couple of my friends were kind of like joking, like, "Hey, why don't we go to skip graduation? We'll go to the draft." And obviously, my mother was not going to allow that to happen. Um, but yeah, like, did you? I know obviously you say hockey was a huge passion of yours, but who was there like a favorite team you had growing up as a kid? Like, did you follow, like you said, you were close to Calgary? Were you a Calgary Flames fan? And did you have anybody that was like someone that you really loved as a kid, and now it's obviously the Leafs?
Yeah. For a while, like since I was so close to Calgary and my dad was like a huge fan of the Calgary Flames, I grew up like watching Jerome McGinley, and like I started off my hockey career playing as a D. So like Jerome McGinley was someone who I really looked up to, especially since like he literally was playing only an hour away from me. So
Mm-hmm.
like I just he was someone I grew up watching, and like the Flames was a team I grew up loving. And then when the golden goal was scored by Sidney Crosby,
Oh,
then I then started, following Sidney Crosby, and then fell in love with the Penguins as well.
it was against my goalie, Ryan Miller. Always loved Ryan Miller. He was always, especially when I always found it hilarious. I mean, he when he came up when he had his jersey retirement a couple weeks ago, and he said in his statement he hated the Leafs. So he all in his like in his speech that got the crowd pumped. He said, "I wanted everybody in Buffalo to be in a good mood because we beat the Maple Leafs the night before." Like,
Yikes.
I mean, it also stems back from I think like you. I mean, you've seen it because you've been to a Sabres Leafs game in Buffalo. That Leaf fans will make that 2 hour drive to
Oh
come to
yeah.
Buffalo, get those lower bowl seats, and pay pay those lower bowl prices rather than pay the same price for 300 level tickets at in Toronto. But
Yeah.
what is there any ties to number 19? Do you have any ties to that, or was that just like kind of a number that you were given?
I definitely have ties to it. So number 19 is the birth date of my late grandma. And it was also like a number that my older brother grew up wearing. So it was like that. And then I think my dad wore number 19 a couple of times as well. So it was like I definitely have the family connections to the number that I wear for both hockey and lacrosse.
All right, now we're gonna get into some fun stuff. Okay, so well, I want to ask, what has like you lived in as an indigenous culture? What can you tell us about just? I see you talking about indigenous people awareness. Just
Mm.
give. I mean, before we get into the fun stuff, I'm gonna flip the switch. It's my show.
Yeah.
Um, just talk a little bit about how what that like what it means to be someone that is of Native American heritage.
It means a lot to me. Like I also, especially like I grew up being so ashamed of like who I was because like the stereotypes and everything that were involved with being an indigenous person. So it was whenever people would ask me like, "Oh, like who are you?" It was like I'm not really, I'm not much. So I always grew up so uncomfortable with like myself and like what culture I was growing up in. And then like it got to a point like something happened and it was like the ungraving of like the children in Kelowna, British Columbia, I'm pretty sure. And there's like a mass grave found of like children that they didn't even know were buried there that like went to the residential schools.
Oh
And it was like,
Jesus.
yeah. And it was like when that happened, my dad was like talking to me and was like, well, like I went to residential schools. And like if they didn't shut down, like I probably could have been there as well. So it was like I was so uncomfortable and then I was so ashamed that I was uncomfortable that it was like, okay, like now I needed to start being involved within my culture. So it's like now I'm just starting to get into it and like relearning everything, relearning my language from like my grandparents and like even my both of my parents as well.
So obviously, you what kind of language is it that you speak?
In my so the Blackfoot culture, we speak Blackfoot.
Oh, okay. Is there any? I mean, obviously, English, but do you speak like? I know that I don't know if Western Canada is like a part of French at all, but can you speak any French?
I could speak very little French, but it was only because like French was a mandatory class in like junior high school, so I never ever took that seriously.
I took Italian. Like, long story short, I took Italian at my old elementary school. That's the only thing they offered. And then when I went over to where I live now, they didn't offer Italian, so I had to choose the next closest thing, which was Spanish, and I did not enjoy that. Um, okay, now we're gonna get to the fun part. I promise it. Okay, so I want to ask. This is my favorite thing because we did this while on the radio station at Buffalo State. We would always ask this: if you could meet any fictional character in real life, who would it be and why? And it could be from like TV, movies, any type of media. I mean, well, if you have one or a top three, because that's what we call it. We called it the top three.
Mhm. I think my number one would probably be Tony Stark.
Oh,
Just
okay.
I think he's such like a cool guy and like he's filthy rich too. So like if I could get a little bit of that money, that'd be kind of nice.
She got gold digger. I'm just kidding.
And then my second person would be Stewie Griffin from Family Guy, just because he's a very interesting character and the adventures that that child goes on has always been like, I don't even, it's crazy. And then the third, I would have to say 11 from Stranger Things.
Ah, okay. I was gonna. I I I got some pod. You want some Cool Whip?
Cool. I love his line.
That Family Guy is one of my favorite shows of all time. I remember I did like in high school. I took a mass media class. That's kind of how I got into the media, and we had to do like talk about something that was controversial in the media, and so I chose Family Guy, obviously. And one day I was downstairs watching Family Guy on Netflix, and my brother said, like, aren't you doing your why aren't you doing your homework? And I said, I am doing my homework. I'm watching Family Guy, seeing how controversial it is. And they go, you better get an effing 100 on this. And I did get 100 on it, but I always, that was like, because my brothers would always got on me in high school and stuff like that. But also, what what's like been your favorite thing about Buffalo so far in your 2 years that you've been here?
I think my favorite thing is been actually seeing how small the classes are, because it's with how small they are, like I've been able to build that one-on-one connection with
Mm-hmm.
all of my professors. So it's like if I'm struggling in the class, I like shoot them up an email and they're not like, who is this? They know exactly who I am. So it's like I've been able to like set up meetings and like meet with my professors, and like I see them the next day in class and they know who I am. So that's definitely been my favorite part about coming to Buffalo State.
Yeah, has there been any, have you ever like come down during the summer, I should say, not come up because you're more north than Buffalo. Have you done anything during the summer, like come to Buffalo? Because obviously Buffalo, I say to people, Buffalo's one of the best places to go in the summer. If they or have you not made that trip yet over the summer?
I haven't made that trip yet over the summer. I
The
definitely,
weather the weather is nice here. I know it gets cold in here during the winter. The four seasons in Buffalo: June, July, August, winter.
yeah, I see that.
But also you live in Canada, so
Yeah.
you're kind of used to the cold. Did you live in like when you were growing up, did you live in like a normal house, or did you live in like like I don't want to say teepee, but like those like anything that kind of has to deal with I don't know what the correct terminology is with Native American cultures. I don't want to say teepees because I feel like that's not the right thing to say.
Yeah. I grew up living in a normal house on the reservation,
Okay.
and then like I recently moved into my grandparents' older house on the reservation. So like we definitely grew up very like modernized because of like we lived in very tight knit communities. Like the houses were literally right beside each other, and now I'm just completely isolated.
Oh, okay. So, all right. Back to the fun stuff. I'm sorry I keep just bouncing off everywhere, but what has been your favorite moment at Buffalo State? Like your favorite moment, whether that's with lacrosse, whether that's with hockey, or whether that's just being in the city and being in Buffalo.
I have two. So I would say my first one would be scoring my like first regular season goal this year in hockey, because it was versus Wilkes and we were tied 0-0. And then in I think the last 36 seconds of the third period, I had a one-on-one. I beat the girl and then was able to tuck it away and then lift my team up that game, and we swept that weekend actually as well. So it was like
That's awesome.
nice being tackled by my team after scored that goal, and then knowing that I was able to contribute to my team in that sort of way as well. And then my second favorite memory would actually be meeting my best friend Mia. I think it was because I lived in Newman my first freshman year, and she was my across the hall neighbor. And the first thing that she like did when she got here, she came in, dropped her stuff, waved, and left. And that was like, I was like, wow, she's awesome. And then we've
You
been
got awesome from that. I would have been like
like
so.
just a wave and left, and I was like, wow, it's my best friend.
I would have been like, who the hell is this chick? Like, you just drop your stuff, wave, and get
Left.
out of here.
Yeah,
I mean, obviously that what a great first impression.
great. It was awesome.
Um also, I wanted to ask about, this season. It wasn't, the win column doesn't look as like if you look at it just on paper, the win column didn't look as great, the
Yeah.
win loss record. But compared to last year, you guys got so many. You got more wins, and looked really good. What can you say was different about this season compared to last season?
I think it was definitely the culture on the team. Like last year, right when we started losing, it was, some of us started to give up. Whereas, this year we knew that we had the talent, we had, stuff going for us. And if we put in the work, we'd eventually get there and the program was going to be stepping in the right direction. So it was definitely, more people wanted to put in the work on and off the ice and wanted to try every single game to like beat hard teams like Cortland, Oswego, and Plattsburgh.
Yeah. So, all right. Another top three that I always like to ask. Okay, so you're obviously not from here. You're from Canada. Top three favorite foods like buffalo foods that you've liked that you've never tried before, and you try to hear and you're like, oh my god, this is delicious. If you got any.
The first one, I never knew this was a thing until my freshman year last year, was chicken wing dip.
Oh yeah, chicken wing
It
dip is
was
great.
so good. Like I had to have like a barbecue with my lacrosse team, and I was like, what is barbie like what is chicken wing dip? And like just try it. I'm like, I'm trusting you a lot with food. And then I tried it and it was so good.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second would be like real chicken wings.
There it is. Are you
they're they're different.
are you a drums or flats?
I'm more of a flats kind of person. They're kind of
Consider
messy
it
to
over.
eat, but like I just like how it's like flat and then you eat around and you can break off the bone and then eat the chicken on the inside. Like I find drums to be just very, I don't know, more of a flats.
I'm just, uh, but have you are you like a blue cheese or please don't tell me ranch?
No, definitely a blue cheese person.
There, there we go. See, even though you're not from Buffalo, you got the one thing that's right in Buffalo is no, we don't put ranch on our wings. I don't put anything on my wings. I eat barbecue wings, and I don't really like to put. My face gets filled with barbecue sauce as it is. I don't need to add blue cheese to the mix. But um, all right, a couple more, and then I appreciate you being on for so long, and I've had a lot of fun, and I want to know like what was your when I first reached out to you to do this, what was your like kind of first reactions? Like were you excited or were you like, who the hell is this kid? Even though
Well,
I'm older than you.
I like saw so I got like the notification on my phone, Instagram, and then like it said like Evan and then your last name, and I was like, who is this guy? And then I like opened it and I was like, oh, like he commentated for my lacrosse games last year as well, I'm pretty sure. So I was like reading the message and I was like, this is such like an awesome opportunity that like I'd be able to have being on a podcast. Like I don't know why, but podcasts are so interesting to me. So I was like, now I got to finally be a part of one. And I was so excited.
Yeah, this is literally this is I've been like kind of telling myself, I'm like, all right, I'm gonna do this now. I gotta get this podcast started. And you know what? I was like, all right, I'm just gonna do one and for you to come on and be really flexible with me. I just want to say thank you. I really appreciate it. Uh Even though you're a Leafs fan, I still really appreciate you coming on. I really, really do.
Thank you for having me. It's definitely been exciting. I was a little nervous at first, but as the process went on, it was nice.
I think I think it's definitely scary when like you got a camera and a microphone in people's face. People are not used to that. Like when they do those interviews, people are like they would rather not be interviewed because they're just a little nervous just to talk. But I also want to just let people know like where can they find you, like give social media tags.
My Instagram is S Running Rabbit. Very easy. And then I think that's actually my username for literally every single thing. So just S Running Rabbit would be my user tag to find me on like Instagram, TikTok, Visco, literally anything.
All right. Well, thank you so much again for coming on. Appreciate looking forward to the your lacrosse season coming up. You're going to be playing lacrosse this year. So, hopefully you get a bunch of goals and you can hear the PA announcer saying Buffalo State goals scored by are you 19 as well in lacrosse?
Yeah.
Scored by number 19 Sage Running Rabbit. And I remember I would do stats for your games, and a couple like people that would actually do like the PA has actually said I love it when she scores because I get to say Sage Running Rabbit, because you don't get to say that too often. And I'm glad I got to say one of my first interviews was with someone who I'm sure that they're every single day they get asked all the time, like, what's, like, "Is a Running Rabbit really her last name?" And I'm like, yes, it's really her last name. It's been a lot of fun. And also, you I want to also know, do people do you have a nickname when you're on the ice? You know how hockey players have nicknames on the ice. Do you just go by Sage, or is there something else that you go by?
Um, I get called like Running Rabbit, or like sometimes like if I allow it, I get called Rabbit. And then for some reason, my lacrosse coach decided to do double R. So I've had quite a bit of nicknames while being at Buffalo State.
See, for me, I would probably just say, like, if we're like on the ice, or on the in on the field, you want to be quick. So I'm surprised that people are like wanting to call you Running Rabbit or Double R. I would just be like Sage, 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 Sage. I mean, I've never played hockey or lacrosse. I mean, look at me. I'm super skinny. I'm 5'11" and I'm just a toothpick. But could never be in a physical sport. That's why I stick to never. I knew I wanted to be a professional athlete when I was a kid, and then when I realized I wasn't that good, chose the next best thing: talk about sports.
Talk about sports.
Well, thank you so much again for coming on. I really appreciate it, and thank you for being my first guest. And hopefully, I'll be hearing more from you down the road.
Thank you for having me. It means a whole bunch to me.
All right, that is Buffalo State. Oh my goodness. Forward. Jeez. That's Buffalo State forward Sage Running Rabbit joining Dipo's Den. That's all for today. Thanks for all watching. Have a good one.